subject is the most important subject I know of to controlling human behavior. If you ever asked yourself, why did I try to make a change and try and not really succeed? You're going to understand the answer by the end of this. And more importantly, if you want to create lasting change, the tool that we're going to talk about today is the tool that creates lasting change. And if it's used improperly, it also gets you stuck. And the term or the tool we're talking about is the power of identity. Now, what is identity? Well, we all identify ourselves in different ways. Who are you? Are you a conservative person, an aggressive person? Are you quiet? Are you outgoing? There's so many ways that we define ourselves. And identity is just the culmination of the beliefs you have about who you are. But those beliefs control how you think, how you feel, what you perceive, how you interact with people, what you're willing to do, not willing to do. In fact, I'd submit to you that after 45 years of working with people in 195 countries all over this planet, from the most successful to the most challenged, the single most important element, if I want to understand what's driving that person, is to understand how they define themselves. Because, hear me now, the most powerful force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. And if you think of someone who's having, quote, an identity crisis, what is that? They turn a certain age and they quickly question everything they had accepted. A belief is something you feel absolutely certain about. You don't believe something if you start to question it. You produce doubt. And so sometimes there are certain stages of life where someone suddenly goes out and has this identity crisis and they buy a sports car or whatever the case may be, and they change their hair and they do everything else. But what's really happening is they're trying to redefine themselves, having defined themselves a long time ago. And we all have these ways of defining ourselves, but let me give you an example of just how powerful it is. So I'll give you a simplistic example. I don't know if you ever smoked cigarettes or know someone who did, but if you go to someone who smokes cigarettes and no longer does, and you said to them, would you like a cigarette? They wouldn't say to you, what brand is it? What would they say to you? No, I'm not a smoker. I'm not one of those. And that's really important because we define ourselves by what we are and by what we're not. And it's not effortful when you're not a smoker. It's not effortful if you say, I'm a health nut, to, not smoke. It's just not part of your world. You don't even consider it, because that need to stay consistent with how you define yourself is the basis of a human being's basic personality making decisions. Now, the downside of this, of course, is you can create a negative identity for yourself. You can have an identity that says, let's say you've put things off a lot, and you're about to go do something and then you get fearful. Everybody has the fear of failure, the fear of something, of the unknown. And the last minute, you don't do it. And then you say, I'm really going to do this. And you do it again and again. After a while, you don't want to disappoint yourself. So you might develop a new identity and say, I'm a procrastinator. Well, once that's who you are, that behavior is going to be consistent. It is that powerful a control system on how we function as human beings. So anything you attach the words I am to over and over again, consistency with your language, with your emotion, and with an emotional intensity, you'll eventually become it because it becomes a belief, and a belief is self-fulfilling. Whether you think you can, whether you think you can't, you're right. So I think this subject, being able to differentiate between having a certain feeling or acting a certain way and being that kind of person is huge. You can use this tool. When I'm working with somebody, I'm looking to create a lasting change. I'm looking to help that person shift how they perceive who they are permanently, not just what they were doing. But I want you to know that today we're going to introduce it to two brilliant people, my two favorite people, my wife Sage and my right arm, and our chosen family, Mary. So I think a lot of men see identity as this is who I am, this is how I am. But for women, identity can often be a burden because there's so many. Now, I don't see it that way within myself, but some people, it used to be easy. I'm a farmer, I'm a mother. But today, you're the farmer, you're the mother, you're the community activist, right? You're the athlete, you're everything. There's so many pieces. And my hope, and the reason I'm having these two ladies take this over with you, is that when you're done with this, you'll start to question some of your old identities, some of the limitations those might bring. So often people say, I'm not that kind of person. What kind of person? And when did you define yourself? A year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, 30 years ago? Most people, it was a long time ago. And maybe at the end of this conversation, it's time to update your sense of identity. Maybe it's time to expand it. Maybe it's time to take some of the labels off that might limit you. Maybe it's time to look at some that you want to define yourself by as you move for the next 5 or 10 years of your life of growth and expansion. But I think it's important to understand how powerful this piece is. It can be used as a weapon to separate people. You're one of those. That's often what happens politically in the world we're in today. No matter what, right, left, center, it doesn't matter. I'm more of an independent myself, so it's a little bit easier to see, but even that, I see myself as independent. I want to be able to see both sides. Not everybody has that feeling. Some people think someone who has a different point of view is evil these days. But the point is, why would we use words to limit us when we can expand our spirits, our hearts, and our souls by expanding our identity, not limiting ourselves in some way? And I want you to know most people define themselves by how they've behaved. And here's what I want you to consider. Whatever people do, they're doing the best they can with the resources they have in that moment. Are there smart people who do stupid things? My bet is you're a smart person. You've probably done stupid things. I sure have. Are there, people that are not seemingly high intelligence who do some really bright things? Of course they do. Is it possible for a really mean person you consider mean to be really nice? Yeah, when they're in a really nice state, they will be. Is it possible for a really nice person to be mean? Of course. Everybody's done it in some time. But the difference is your identity. So our identity is more powerful than even the truth. Your beliefs about people shape your relationships with them. And then your beliefs, of course, about yourself are the most powerful of all. And that's why I think this subject is so critical. But here's what I want you to realize. People are not their behaviors. You are not their behaviors. We've all done dumb things, doesn't mean you're dumb. We've all done smart things, doesn't mean you're absolutely smart, right? It's not that black and white. It's not that simple, but that's the way the mind tries to reduce things. That's the reductionism of the mind, not your heart, not your soul, not your spirit, but the mind. It's trying to keep things this or that. It's chopping it down. It's reductionism. You don't want to fall for that. But I want you to know you can also expand your identity, not by telling yourself, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, but by doing something. It's like self-esteem. I hear so many parents talk about, I want my kids to have so much self-esteem. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes. And I'm not the only one who believes this. Dr. Was it Beck from Stanford? Carolyn Dweck. I remember reading her books and she's talking about how we've raised our children and told them they're great all the time and they're wonderful and they're perfect. And what it really does is mess them up. And the research shows it, because then they go in the real world and they aren't perfect. They aren't all the things their parents told them, they've been told their whole life. And now they're scared to try something where they're not who they thought they were, because their identity was larger than who they were, as opposed to rewarding your child for effort. Wow, that's amazing effort. Boy, if you keep doing that, you'll achieve whatever you want. That's a true statement. They can grow and expand out of that. So I just want you to understand, there are situations where people get in a certain emotional state. They're scared, they're angry, they're afraid, they're whatever, and they behave a certain way. But if they do that several times, they might say, that's the kind of person I am. And once you do, it's self-fulfilling. Or worse, you know somebody and they were mean to you sometime and they're harsh. Oh, they're such a mean, harsh person. Well, I bet they're different with their child. I bet they're different when they're not under stress. So when we give somebody an identity, we limit our ability to actually reach that soul or that spirit, and we limit our own world. And we put ourselves in a place of judgment of others. And when we're judging others, who's the first person we're going to judge? Ourselves. So this is an area that deserves taking the time to think, really looking at all the consequences of identity, and also understanding it's the controlling force in your life. So it's controlling decision-making. It's controlling your perceptions of yourself. It's controlling perceptions of others. And here's one more thing it controls: how far you grow or fall. So I'll give you a metaphor I like to share with people. Think of it this way. If you set a thermostat on the wall and you set that thing at 68 degrees, and let's use 68 degrees as the metaphor, not for your goals in life, but your comfort zone, which is your identity, right? You might have these huge goals. I want to be this, but have you ever said, I'm going to go do this? And then some voice inside your head says, who are you kidding, right? The who are you kidding is, that's a big reach beyond who you are in your mind at that time. So say 68 degrees represents where you're comfortable financially, not where you want to be, but what you're used to, your current identity. You might say, I want to be financially free, but you're financially struggling, and that's your identity inside your head. You want financially free, but you're financially struggling. You can do the same thing for your body. It's not your ideal, it's what you gotten used to. It's your identity, it's who I am, right? Like I remember I used to say, I'm big boned, that's why I'm overweight. That was my excuse and reason, right? That was my identity for a long time. So I broke that pattern and kept it out. So what happens if you set it 68 degrees, and we're using that as a temperature metaphor, and things get less than you think they should be? Not your goals, but less than your identity. Like all of a sudden you gain 15 pounds during COVID or 20. or something happens in your body or your relationship that really is uncomfortable, or your finances drop to a certain level, there's a point where it goes 68, 65, 63, somewhere around 60 degrees, maybe 59. Something's going to go on in that computer and it's going to go, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing here at 59? Right? You're a 68 degreeer. And have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt like things got so below your own standard that something and you kicked on, it's that this is changing now. Now, the minute, not an hour, I'm doing this now. I'm sure you have. And what happens is the heaters kick on, the drive to get back to where you think your basic identity is. And people do that. They get off drive and suddenly they're pushed and they find the way and they usually get there. Or they adjust to a lower identity. And that's what some people do over and over throughout their life. And that's why they're so disappointed. And they have a reason, because somebody betrayed them, because this happened, because something happened in the economy. And all those things probably really did happen. But it was really the drop in identity, because once it's your identity, you find the way. But think of it this way. If things get bad enough, you get this drive to get back to your identity. Not your goals, your identity, right? Your musts. Your must is who you think you are. If all of a sudden you start doing better than you dreamed of, you work harder, you get some breakthroughs, you get some insights, and now emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically, your career, whatever, goes from 68 degrees to 78 to 88 to 90, 99 degrees, around 99 degrees, and something happens in your brain goes, hey, what are you doing? You're a 68 degree, or what are you doing here at 99? You don't belong here. And then what happens? The heaters of drive stop. And if that's not enough, the air conditioners kick in, you start saying things that mess up the relationship. You start sabotaging things in the business. You start sleeping